Hi, I'm Dick Miller, and next to me is Jeff Smith, Senator Jeff Smith, and welcome.
It's a new year.
Yes, and visited with Jeff just a minute before we started, and he had a chance to see some of the new courthouse here today, and maybe we can go upstairs and look at the district court or the circuit court area, and it's very interesting. I think just for those of you who may be viewing this, if you're in town in Whitehall and are interested in seeing the law enforcement center that just recently opened, not everybody has moved into their respective new office space or home, but it's coming, and come in and look at it. I think we're all of us who pay taxes here need to know how our taxes are being spent.
Yeah, it's really impressive. It's really impressive.
Yeah, I know the plan was by the board at the time this was approved to kind of build for the future, and as most of you can probably see if you do come in, indeed there are expansion areas. One of the areas that I'll point out to Jeff, since he gets to vote on some of these things in the Senate, I think, is that we added a second courtroom. This county has been case-wise is very high on the list to get a second judge, and but we were told that you have to have a courtroom for that second judge. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think that those decisions have to be made at the legislative level, rather than locally. But there's reasons for that. You're creating a new elected position for one thing, and so
So anyway, that's anyway. Please feel welcome. And Jeff, we haven't gotten together here for a couple of months anyway. We've been on a vacation, but I understand the Senate is operating.
Sure, we are. As much as we can be. It's so, in a sense, of course, the holidays, that's what caused you and me to not be able to get together as well. Didn't work out, but we are nearing the end of this so-called two-year session, the 23-24 session. Well, we will. The majority party has chosen. I think we had a session day this past week, and it's the only session day scheduled for January. So again, help me out here. It doesn't feel like to you that we're working. We only have one session day, but we are really having a lot of committee hearings right now because they're trying to rapidly get through the bills that have been introduced into hearings. And I've been told, I think we're going to have promised 3 session days coming forward. I think 2 in February, 1 in March, and then we might be done, which that's a whole nother issue. I have no problem talking about how I think we get finished way too soon before they go into campaign. And this is not a campaign year for me, but we're going to talk about that later too.
Yeah. But it is a big campaign year. There's no question about it.
Sure it is.
There'll be a lot of people that are going to be out on the stump, so to speak. Now, the last couple of months, any highlights that stick in your mind that maybe our viewers would be interested in?
Well, that's another good question. Again, when you're heading into a big election year, and like you said, this is really, and we're going to even touch more on that, but it causes a shift in the way we operate sometimes, because the majority party determines what goes on the calendar, what we actually vote on, if we vote on things they like or don't like, or truth is, whether those of us in the minority party get a bill heard or voted on. And I just yesterday had 2 bills in a hearing that I'm a co-author of, and sat before that committee. And I can tell you, and I said it yesterday several times, I was 0 for 5 years, 0 for 5 years for well over a couple hundred bills that I was co-author of or author of. And then all of a sudden in this past month, I've had 4 or 5 times I've been in front of a committee answering questions about bills that I co-authored. So there's that shift is as we go into an election year like this, where there's that, natural, oh, we better be friendlier, and we better, maybe have some of these hearings done. So that's where we're at now.
Yeah, we've talked about this quite a bit in the past, I think, in terms of the amount of days that are not productive for those of you who are serving in the Senate and the Assembly, which is unfortunate because there are so many topics of concern and interest. At least should have a hearing, a fair hearing. Obviously you can't pass all the legislation that comes before the houses, but
well,
and I think this is what you've talked about in the past.
Yeah.
You want a fair hearing,
Yeah,
so people
I think a public hearing
Yeah.
is just that. It's an opportunity to have the public able to state their case as well, and if they care or don't care about something, but also become more informed.
Yeah.
Because generally, let's face it, you don't generally know what's been introduced until it's announced that there's a public hearing on it. Because we really, in the legislature, will introduce, by the end of a session period, there will be 1,100 or 1,200 bills that are actually introduced, and nobody can keep up with that if you're not, because a lot of them don't draw interest. But the press draws interest to us about some things. For instance, and this I think is worth mentioning, is the recent epiphany that the Republican leadership has had about marijuana. And they've introduced a medical marijuana bill that has, of course, taken kind of spotlight in the press. But the fact is, from my opinion, and I think I'm not alone, that it's really for show, not expected to actually make it through the process at all, but it's for campaign purposes, to be able to finally say from the Republicans who sponsored it, or to say, see, we really do want to get something done, and that in that area. Well, if they really did want to get something done, we would get something done. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but the bill was designed to only have 5 dispensaries around the state, all owned and managed by the state, which is really interesting, since that's not the way Republicans normally would want things to happen. They would want less state involvement. So that puts themselves in a place where not a lot of their caucus agrees with that, right? And then they list who would be eligible, as if we're the doctors who should be able to tell people that you have enough pain, you should be able to use this. And so we're putting ourselves in the shoes of the medical professionals, and that's not right either.
Yeah, not if it's something to be dispensed by medically trained people.
So it's not a bill that was meant to become law.
Okay. And I've touched on this, and I think you followed up with your comments in the past. You're a Democrat, and you run as a Democrat. Is it safe to say that both Republicans and Democrats have worthy ideas, worthy of public hearings in terms of bills, that party shouldn't be the controlling factor, no matter what party's in power?
Yes, absolutely. For sure, there's no question about it. When we're trying to address our child obesity, as a task force for that, right? We're trying to address child mental health, which has been making a lot of news lately because of studies that have been produced lately, showing that the incoming middle school and high schoolers are struggling, and that's going to continue to advance into the university. I just had this conversation with university people yesterday, and of course into real life as well. So we've got to address that at an early stage, and there are bills introduced by Republicans that I certainly agree, yes, let's do something about these things, right? Now, are there bills that we introduce that Republicans should also taken notice of? Of course there are. You know, this is the way the system. We want the system to work. And so one bill I've had the hearing in both houses, which is really unprecedented for me. So both houses have held hearings on my final 5 voting bill, which I have Republican co-authors, and which is really fun to sit before a committee with 2 or 3 Republicans along with myself and another Democrat in favor of an idea and defending it and answering questions about it, and I just, it's so refreshing, and I really like that. And finally I'll say, we just passed a bill that was mine for the past several sessions, or few sessions, that actually was taken by a Republican. They didn't ask me ahead of time that they wanted to take this, but that's okay. They gave me a third on the bill to be able to continue to be an author of this bill. But I testified on that, and we passed it. I had a floor speech about that, and that was actually, it may seem minor to a lot of people, but it still feels good to be able to get something passed, and to a lot of people it's important, because if the governor signs it, it will mean that the stretch of I-90 from the Minnesota border to Toma will be named the Ho-Chunk Code Talkers Memorial Highway. And it is so important because for our tribes, and especially our part of the state here, the Ho-Chunk, it recognizes the contributions they made to this country in the First and Second World Wars. When in fact in the 1890s, I had a whole speech that I made about this on the floor. In the 1890s, here we were placing children from tribes into schools, and then punishing them if they even spoke their native language, trying to actually create a very plain, you lose those languages, right? They were trying to lose those languages. Thank God for us, as we now know, in those First and Second World War, we needed those languages. And the tribes themselves made sure that their children did not forget their language and learned their language. And it was very much a important part of how we won those wars and those battles. And so that it needs to be recognized that we are all one nation. And whether we speak the same language or not, we love our country, and we're going to fight for our country together. And I just think it's a great reminder. So I'm excited about that.
Well, just to remind some of us who are younger, not me, I know what these folks were doing, but can you kind of describe the role that these particular folks played in combat?
I think 25 years ago there was a Hollywood movie on it, and it was, of course, I think it was the Comanche language or the Apache language, but there were, I think, 5 different languages or something in that number that were used. So once they realized, I should say they being the military, realized that it was really hard to not have the enemy, Japanese and or in Europe, the Germans, intercept their messages and easily be able to break their codes and know what they were doing ahead of time. But once they realized they had so many Native Americans enlisting and joining the fight, and they spoke a different language, they were able to create these new codes using specifically their language, the Ho-Chunk, Apache, Comanche. There were some others, like I said, and they couldn't break that. They weren't familiar with it. They couldn't break that, and it made just such a huge difference. Turned the tide.
Yeah, well, I think that it's the movie was pretty good, and I don't know that a lot of us prior to that had an understanding of the role they had played. I think maybe in terms of this whole subject area, I think the one thing we fail to do oftentimes is celebrate the differences, our differences of culture, and to encourage it. As you and I are, well, I'm older than you are, but when the Laotian families came to the States, they continued their language in their home.
Yeah.
But you know what? Every one of those kids sounds like you and sounds like me, who went to school.
Yeah.
So I don't think, hopefully, we didn't discourage them from maintaining some of their cultural ties, and that they were able to do both.
Yeah. I remember my grandparents on my mother's side speaking Polish.
Yeah. Yeah.
And having this regret that it was left behind.
Yeah. And a lot of these do end. When we moved to the area in about '78, there were a lot of the older guys would come in the hardware store speaking Norwegian. It was an opportunity to continue their language skills, but within a generation that was gone.
Yeah, but finally, though, in this case, when it comes to code talkers, every ceremony that I see when it comes to Veterans Day, Memorial Day, there are so many tribal members who show up in uniform. And when I was younger, I wondered, wow, what was that all about? Well, they took a lot of great pride in protecting this country. This was their country too.
Yeah.
And they fought for this country. And I just don't know that we recognize that enough or realize how important that was to them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think to feel you're part of a country is really important. To feel you have purpose.
We're the melting pot.
Yeah, I think
we
have been.
Yeah.
Certainly. So that bill is Senate Bill 633, and now where does that stand right?
That wasn't 633.
No,
633 was the Final Five bill.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What was this bill? I don't know the bill number in this one, but it is now being sent to. I can't be sure the Assembly has passed it. I'm not sure.
But the Senate
has.
But
they may have passed it yesterday, and I don't know yesterday.
The Senate has passed it.
But the Senate passed it.
Okay. Well, good. Well, it's nice to be recognized as a lawmaker. I imagine.
Well, in this case, it took. You would have thought this would have been an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
2 or 3 sessions ago, but because I was the author and I presented it, it wasn't given a hearing. But once a Republican latched onto it and took the lead on it, then we got it through.
Okay.
So that's how the politics has been working in this state.
Yeah. Well, my understanding is that particular bill came to your attention via a citizen of your district.
It did. If I should, let me see. I got to recognize. Let's see. It was. Oh wow! I know I got it. I have it in here. Oh yeah, it's Sandy Winishek. Sandy Winishek contacted my office and said, this would be really important to do for the nation. So we did.
Yeah.
And that's how a law becomes a law.
It's a great example.
Starts with you and coming to us. We're your conduit. We're not the geniuses that some of my colleagues think they are.
Right. I think that's a great lesson for us that it takes our input.
Yeah.
Where there is a situation or a problem, and this certainly wasn't a problem, but it was a situation that deserved attention.
So if you know Sandy, thank Sandy for that.
Yeah. I happened to see that name, Winishek, and we moved to Wisconsin from Winishek County, Iowa.
Oh.
So that particular name is very.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. And like Trempealeau, I think they're both tied to the Native Americans
Yeah.
who were there, here at one time or now still here.
Yeah.
Well, that's good news. I'm glad to see that something's happened there. The Final Five is something we talked about one other time, and that was in reference to a new method of allowing our vote to pass on to another candidate if the original choice.
Yeah, I think it's important, and I've learned this through the hearings too, to stress more about the primary. The difference in my bill is the primary, not as much as people are focused on the general election. Yes, the general election becomes rank choice voting, but only after you bring the number down to 5. Now, a lot of people will say, well, we can't get 5 people to run for one office. Under the current system, that's true. You know, you're going to have party favorites and that sort of thing, and that's what you get. We get 2-3 people in a primary maybe, and that's it. But when you put both parties together, and the example that was brought to us as a negative, they thought it was a negative, but I think they actually worked in our favor, explaining why our bill can work. An example was, well, we did ranked choice voting in our state, and we had 35 people on the ballot, and it was too confusing. It took 33 rounds before they got to the winner, because you have to have a majority of the vote to win. And yeah, that would be, because you didn't have a primary to pare it down. So in our case, we still have a primary, but it's an open primary with both parties, or all parties, because it could be Libertarian, Green Party, it could be independent, of all sorts of nature. But so you could have 30 candidates running, because all of a sudden they feel like, gee, I could make it to the Final Five. So we're a competitive country, and we're competitive people, and we're going to compete to try to be in that Final Five. And you're going to ask people to, let me be your second choice, let me be your first choice, and I just want to make it to the Final Five. And so when you pare it down to 5, now you're only ranking 5. You only vote for 1 in the primary out of those, whatever it might be, 8, 10, 20 people that come out of the woodwork to run for an office. And I'm excited about the possibilities, and the more that, and let me tell you, by the way, those people bringing those negative views of this bill were all from out of state. I'm talking Oklahoma, Texas, Maine, out west somewhere. It was fascinating, and I asked them, why do you think we're told not to trust people from out of state to tell us what to do, and yet you're all coming from out of state to tell us what to do?
And none of them have the system like that at all.
They're not paring it down to that. They have tried ranked choice voting, purely ranked choice voting. Well, there's a reason for that. The powers that be like the system that we have for very good reasons. And if you don't like the system that we have, then we need to do something different. And this is so I encourage you to look it up, Google it, Final Five voting. Just Google that, and you can get a demonstration and explanation that works for you, or makes it more clear. But it's an exciting concept. Alaska has adopted it.
Oh, just
and
recently.
Nevada is on the verge of.
Is that right?
Yep.
Is it Washington or Oregon that has it now?
No.
Either one
Neither
of those?
of them. They have. There's other things they have. Washington and Oregon have ballot. Ballot boxes where you can deliver your. They've been doing that for like 30 years, and it's worked well for them. But Maine was one that has ranked choice voting. Actually, Minneapolis area has ranked. A lot of communities have ranked choice voting, and they've struggled with it because of the reasons that we just described. Too many people get on the ballot; it gets confusing, and people.
This is the final ballot you're talking about.
Yeah. They don't even do a primary then.
Yeah.
They eliminate the primary, which they thought was a good idea, but no, it's not.
right. So then, what you're saying is that you don't have to necessarily be a lifetime member of a party
Yeah.
to have a chance of being elected.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And you see it from time to time. A major party will like someone over somebody else and rule out people who have potential.
Yeah. I was one of those.
Were you?
Oh, yeah. Twice.
Oh, you have
So
experience.
I'm well aware of how that can work.
Yeah.
And you have to overcome.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I also believe we each need to earn our seat, and we all should work hard if we want to be elected to represent you.
Right. And I think that brings us to another topic, and I want to just touch the highlights of it, and that is there is some redistricting plans that are going to be submitted. I think they have to be submitted by February 1st to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And I think there's 7 plans that deal with redistricting, and that'll be an intro to where I want to go with this.
Sure.
Just to maybe, if you can share with the viewers the process that seems to be in play at this time.
Yeah, so they had to submit maps, groups had to submit maps by January 12th. So we're past that. And 7 maps were submitted. And out of those 7 maps, they vary from, maybe some would consider extreme one party the other, and then everything in between. Personally, I am happy with the maps that were submitted, and majority of them were, that lays it out for you, the voter, to determine who ends up in the majority. That's the key thing, and I don't know a lot of people realize, or as many people who should realize, that the majority is what this is all about. Holding the majority, you make the rules. You see, like I've mentioned over and over, what bills actually get hearings or come to the floor for votes, what gets moved on to the governor's desk. I know that all the glamour is about that top seat, whether it be president or whether it be governor in your state. They don't get to do much of anything. They do have some powers that they can do, administrative powers, but they don't have the power to pass law that is not sent to them from the legislature or Congress. Holding the majority is key. And when you have what we have now of a gerrymandered state, and I can say that because that's just a fact that everyone is aware of, that has an overwhelming majority in the legislature that ignores the minority and is able to do anything they want or not, because now we have a Democratic governor and this Republican majority, and we end up stuck in the mud and getting so little done. But when we end up with maps, I'm really hopeful we end up with these maps where there's no perfect or obvious winner just by looking at the maps. Instead, it's going to be up to you. So there's going to be so many toss-up seats. Nobody has an advantage more than 51% or 50% or 52% at the most. It puts everybody on notice that we have to earn your vote. We have to be working for you, not for the party, right? So it's not going to be down to the primary, which we just talked about primaries, but it's going to be back to the fact that we could take and win a general election no matter what party you are, depending on how you relate to the voters you're representing.
So if you do a good job, most likely you'll stand a better chance of being reelected, according to the majority of people voting in that particular district.
There's a lot of factors, of course, depending on the mood of the country at the time. But still, that's my goal, is to have what we call a proportional map, meaning that if the whole state is leaning towards a certain political mood, that's how this should turn out. not just because we have legislative maps that have chosen how it's going to end up.
Well, I think we're coming to the end, and I would like to go further on this, but at least we made the viewers aware of some of the happenings down at the Senate.
Pay attention.
So thank you for being with us today, and we'll try to be back again.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye now.